Welcome to Inspiring Insurance. Our goal is to provide value to the insurance industry through real life experiences from insurance professionals who have walked the walk. You can expect to hear story sharing, top tips, and practical advice to help you grow and succeed in your career. We hope you enjoy this episode's guest. Welcome back to Inspiring Insurance. Today we're back in Brisbane. I'm joined by Cooper Wright from Keystone Insurance. Thanks for joining me, Cooper.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nathan. Really appreciate it.
No worries, mate. Well, first question, as always, what made you choose insurance as a career?
I guess it's the sort of age-old thing with insurance. You don't really pick it; you kind of fall into it. So,
Yeah.
um, I was working in retail. I was doing that for a couple of years straight out of uni, and I did Bachelor of Commerce in accounting, and thought that what a sort of might be what I'd want to get into, and eventually found out pretty quickly it wasn't. So, started to sort of do something to sort of gain that sort of customer service experience and really understanding, sort of people's behaviors and sort of all that sort of stuff behind the scenes, but I think is really handy for, sort of any industry, but insurance in general, because it is a service-based industry. And yeah, kind of from there, as you can imagine, my parents have their own business, which is Keystone. So I've been in and around it for all my life. So I did, kind of have a chat to them to sort of figure out what we could sort of work out. I'm coming into the business and figuring out sort of what I could do, and started in insurance, as in admin actually, right from the bottom, and learn all the processing, sort of how renewals work, really how insurance works in general. And then from there, yeah, progressed into broking, and yeah, now I guess managing sort of quite a decent size book of clients, and really yeah, trying to push it forward.
Yeah, cool. So how long have you been in the insurance industry for now?
Well, it'd be roughly 2.5 years now.
Mhm.
So I mean, really, it's quite early, but yeah, in
Yeah.
2.5 years, I've definitely learned, a huge amount. Not just about the industry, but definitely about yourself, and sort of, you do definitely grow a lot, I think, when you do get sort of chucked in the deep end, and just have to either, think or swim kind of thing. So yeah, it's been a sort of a short journey so far, but obviously, yeah, still a lot to learn and a lot to come.
Yeah, nice. You're just getting started, mate, really.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So walk me through those first 12 months. What
Yeah.
what what was the I guess the roadmap for you in those first 12 months, and then we'll work into the second year.
Yeah, of course. So I think the first 12 months was really just, you're super green, I had a basic understanding of insurance. Like, as I said, my parents have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and obviously had a basic sort of understanding, but it was really, starting from the bottom, and understanding, the first sort of part of the process. So your renewals, all your sort of basic admin ad hoc tasks, really understanding the back end of it, and obviously just the business in general. And then
Mm.
obviously really, doing your training, so your tier two, starting your tier one, etc. And getting the basic understanding, and then obviously, really figuring out how it works, why it works, going through all the policy wordings, all those sort of things, and really just trying to be a sponge. That was, I think, the biggest thing is not being afraid to ask questions. And a lot of people, I think, are sometimes afraid to ask stupid questions, but I think they're probably the best questions to ask. You do find out a lot, and I think people in the industry, if yeah, especially sort of people that have been in the industry for quite a long time, I think they actually do, at least the people I've spoken to, actually do want to help people that have come into the industry, and are happy to, answer questions, and see what they can do to help. So, I found that really helpful to just ask questions. I probably asked too many, but I found out a lot, and it was really just about, yeah, as I said, being a sponge and just taking as much as you can.
Yeah, cool. So first 12 months all about learning as much as you
Yeah,
can. What
exactly.
about your second? Yeah, what about your second year?
Yeah, second year was definitely more transitioning into broking. So I think the first year, the probably first 6 months was just all admin. Slowly progressed into, starting the broking side of things, and doing some real basic stuff. The second year is definitely where it sort of pushed into, really doing full-time broking. Obviously still working through the tier one, etc. But that's when I really started to work sort of on my own book, and starting to sort of move from there. Obviously, really just domestic side of things, but I guess you learn sort of a lot doing the sort of domestic stuff from the beginning, and sort of moving up from there. But it was, yeah, really that sort of first 6 months, you're focusing on domestic portfolio, and then from there, moving up into doing some, a lot of farm pack stuff. In our business, it is a lot of rural and farm stuff, and then also some, some commercial stuff as well. So that was kind of the second year, and it's yeah, kind of continued from there to just grow and grow like portfolio wise, and sort of what I'm looking after. But yeah, slowly but surely, yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And so you work for a family business, so you
yeah,
report into your old man.
that's right.
How do you find that works for you? Some people would
Um,
say I'm absolutely not doing that, but it's obviously working
yeah,
well for you.
yeah. I mean, look, it's as I said, like, I fully respect that it's their business at the end of the day. So, I've come in to really learn and gain a skill. So, I've come in and I think from the beginning, there's always the thing that you are family, obviously, and there's obviously got to be that split between, family and business. So I think we've probably managed that quite well. At times, as you can imagine, it's quite the opposite, but I think it's really just about respect as well. Like, there's a big amount of respect, from me to my old man. Like, he's taught me a lot, and there's still a lot to learn. So I think,
Mm,
yeah, that's probably the biggest thing is just, having that that really destined line of, this is family, and outside of business,
mm,
we are still a family, and in business, it's strictly business, and the decisions made are purely for the business and not for the family. So that's I think the biggest thing to try and
mm,
make it work, and respect. Yeah.
Have you ever butted heads at all, like from the business side of
Oh,
things?
of course, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's always, like there's always a few things. I think, direction of the business, I think we both agree on. Like there's obviously a few of us in the business as well that sort of have some sort of say in the decisions, etc. Or we all sort of, have some constructive discussions and probably some constructive criticism as well. Um, but yeah, I think there's definitely things that, probably more so on, processing side and the technology side of things that,
Mm,
obviously trying to move the business from where it sort of was when I came in to kind of where it is now, where it's slowly becoming, definitely more technology enabled and becoming a lot more streamlined and a lot easier to actually do business. So that's probably really the only things we've butted on is just, obviously a
yeah.
lot of the time not understanding sort of, how things work or these new solutions, etc. And just really having to, discuss it and explain it and put it in a way that makes sense that you can actually make a decision that's actually going to be, good for the business. Yeah.
Yeah, yep, yep. And so the business is structured. So you've got offices Brisbane and then also up in Rockhampton. So
Yeah.
obviously you report into your father who's up in Rockhampton. How do
Yeah.
you technically that's almost like a remote working setup, even though you've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
multiple offices. But how do you find that works having, I guess, the manager in a different location?
Look, I think it's quite okay because he does, he is down here quite a bit.
Mm,
He's always down probably once or twice a month, and he's always, going around somewhere or doing something. So, he actually works on the financial planning side of the business, so he kind of, manages both at the same time. But it really does work. Like these days, I think it's easy enough to really manage, a relationship like that. Like there's I guess plenty of businesses where you do have to sometimes have, remote workers and we've
mm,
got two or three and essentially I guess as me as well, in Brisbane. So, it can be tricky at times, like obviously just coordinating, especially trying to make decisions and at least sort of being able to sit down and discuss things with each other. But I think as well, like it's easy enough these days to make it work. Yeah.
for sure. And so he set up a financial planning business. Then there's
Yeah.
the insurance broking arm to it as well. How does that work as a, I guess, a dual side by side business
Yeah.
arrangement?
It's interesting. It's interesting. So, I mean, really that's his baby is the financial planning.
Mm,
And he's got a team that he has in Rocky that help him manage that and they do that really well. So that's essentially completely different.
mm,
Thankfully it's not sort of completely intertwined. So we're definitely separate businesses, and I think it can sometimes be tricky because there's always some sort of overlap.
yeah.
But I think really as well, like, he's done it for that long and really we've had, a great team in insurance that can really manage it, on their own and they're obviously they're all adults. So, they know what they're doing and they've had a lot of experience. So yeah, it's tricky, but most of the time it does work quite well.
I see a lot of these sort of arrangements popping up with the wealth management side and the insurance broking
Yeah.
side. Do you think that what's the benefit by having both kind of side by side?
Yeah, look, I think, in general, financial planning, it is risk. I guess that's really the biggest thing. It's risk management,
Mm,
it's risk mitigation, and that's the same thing with insurance. So I think, there is a lot of FP clients that we do work with insurance as well. So, or at least they'll have some queries that we can actually assist with, and, probably makes the financial planning process that bit easier, just having sort of,
yeah.
the dual arm. So, I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's where also he learnt how to be a really great financial planner is to really understand risk, and that's,
Yep.
from insurance. So I think it's really complementary. Like it is one of those things that it probably can sometimes be the opposite, but I think in our case, it's really, probably helped us, especially in the financial planning side, to really understand risk and try and actually service our clients in the best way we can. And I think that's really complementary.
For sure. And I guess it would mean that there's a added benefit for your clients because they get that
Yeah,
holistic kind of service on both sides, but then it's also
yeah, that's right.
generating new leads for you from the insurance side as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
definitely one of those things like yeah, and we're always happy to, review risks as well or do some sort of risk analysis for them. Even on the financial planning side that, sometimes they will ask for that, and we're obviously here to help that, and if we do get some, sort of client relationship out of it on our side, it's always beneficial, but most of the
Mm,
time it is really just because he does head it up himself, like he also does just really understand risk. And even for us in GI, like it is one of those things like you can really see like, being in the industry for so long and also having that financial planning background, he does understand, like really looking into those little things that you wouldn't think do matter. But when you
yeah.
do look into them, they can actually make quite a big difference. And really that's, I guess, risk management at its core. Yeah.
For sure. Has there ever been any like really curly claims that you've had come across on the GI side of things?
Yeah, I can think of a few.
Yeah.
Um, So I guess when I first started, I definitely got chucked in the deep end to do admin, a little bit of broking, and obviously a lot of claims as well. So I took on the claims quite early when I started, and yeah, I mean you definitely learned a lot, I think, from doing claims.
Yeah.
You know, it really is about service, I think, as well. Like, and it's really understanding, from their point of view as the client, like, what's actually going on and how you would feel as a client if, for example, you lost your house or someone's stolen your car or whatever it may be. Like, and obviously bigger stuff as well, where someone's, trying to sue you or whatever it may be. So there's
Mhm.
definitely been a lot of claims where a lot of emotion, and obviously things that are quite complex as well, like a lot of liability stuff,
Yeah.
which is obviously quite difficult to deal with. But I think it's made me more rounded as a broker and can really understand more like when something does happen and you do, have to sort of claim, it's you kind of know the next steps and you can actually
Mm.
make it a little bit easier. But
Mm.
definitely a few I can think of. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sure. So you made a point then around, I guess, that level of service and
Yeah.
providing exceptional service. What does that level look like from your perspective? How do you provide great service as a broker?
Yeah, look, I think it's really regular contact with the client. So like obviously we've got quite a sort of large book of clients and it's really I think, like just taking the time with each client to really be in touch and be constantly in touch as well. I think the relationship side of things is it's probably more important than actually the whole broking side. Like it's a relationship business and it is a relationship service. So a lot of our clients we've had for a long time and it's really all been based on having a relationship and when someone calls you're
Mm.
there, like
Yep.
when something happens you're there,
Mm.
and even like for just simple things like just making it as easy as possible for someone to place cover or get what they need as soon as possible and just really understanding that the business is a service business and it's
Mm.
really about just being available and actually just understanding from their point of view, like for example, if they're needing urgent cover on a Friday afternoon, like obviously a lot of people, probably in the industry probably wouldn't be too keen on assisting with that. But,
Yeah.
like from our point of view and my point of view, like if someone's paying, for quite a substantial premium, like you better be there, when they need
Yeah.
you to help them out. So I think it's
Yeah.
really just about taking the time to actually do those little things right and just having a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So, question, if you could change one thing about the insurance industry, what would it be and why would you change that particular thing?
Oh, it's a good question. That is a very good question. Um, Look, I think there's a lot of compliance. Not to say that's a bad thing, but I think
Mm.
sometimes it can be detrimental.
Yeah.
Like I just think about in my day to day, like there is just a lot of things you have to think about compliance wise to make sure you sort of sit within those boundaries. I think a lot of it does obviously benefit the client and does benefit the industry, but there's a lot of stuff that's probably come in that, can sometimes be a little bit detrimental. But I think as well, just, on the actual, I guess, insurance side of things and underwriting side of things, like, I think a lot of the newer players that are coming in the industry, like for example, Shaw, Castle, etc., I think they're doing a great job at, really identifying the best places to underwrite, etc., and really being able to offer competitive premiums. So I think whilst premium isn't the most important thing, for a lot of people it is. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, if they could start sort of bringing on sort of, or make it easier for, smaller insurers to get into the industry and really, or underwriters at least to get into the industry and be able to offer, more solutions essentially.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously a lot in the market, but, I think at the end of the day, there's really only so many. And I think to be able to actually offer a more competitive market, I think there needs to be a lot more competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's obviously a lot of big sort of broking groups and underwriting groups, etc., that are in the industry, which obviously they offer a lot of great services. But I think as well that when you start sort of bundling up these massive groups of agencies or insurers, then I think sometimes the competitive side of things, which the market is supposed to be, does kind of become a little bit lackluster. But apart from that, it is a great industry if you do get into it.
Mm.
Um, but there is a few things that could be done better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything that you've learned since joining the industry a couple of years ago, which you were unaware of, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that, and now it's a big eye opener for me.
Yeah. It's probably too many to tell, to be honest. Like there is really just so many things, like even on a weekly basis that you just find out that, really does, I wouldn't say shock you, but it really does just surprise you how many sides to the business there is and the industry itself. So I mean, when I first started, I think the biggest thing I learnt was like if you go and look at an insurer's website, etc., like for example, a Shore or a Castle, whatever it may be, you go look at the bottom of the page and it's obviously talking about who's underwriting what, etc. I never really knew about, you just see this insurer and you don't really actually think about who's underwriting the product or, who's providing the capacity or whatever it might
Sure.
be. And I think, that's a pretty key thing. These days, I think a lot of people want to know who's backing an insurer. Like, for example,
Mm.
Shaw, they've obviously got a sort of a new capacity with QBE recently, etc. And I think a lot of people like to know those things. And so I think
Mm.
when I first learned that, I think I learned a lot about, sort of the actual industry itself and sort of how
Mm.
overall it does work. And obviously, the whole Lloyd's of London side of thing, that's very interesting as well. So
Yeah.
learning about that has been probably a big eye opener as well, and how it all kind of intertwines. But there's a lot of interesting things you learn, I think, along the way.
So for someone new to the industry who might be going through that, I
Yeah.
guess, learning phase at the moment, what would you tell them to do if they were trying to find that information?
Look, I think it's really, like insurance news is a great way to do it. So,
Mhm.
like even on LinkedIn, if you follow them and you'll always get something coming up every day or every week. That's
Yep.
super interesting to read. So I think it's really just taking in as much information as you can. So, insurance news or, you've got some sort of subscription for some sort of, like the AFR, for example, or whatever it may be. Like, you know, just seeing like I guess what's happening in the industry and you can see the people moving in the industry as well. Like you always see a lot of that, especially on LinkedIn, as you can imagine.
Yep.
So I think a lot of that's really key. And I think that's probably where I've learned a lot of things that you probably don't really get told, but you kind of just have to find out yourself as, new partnerships in the industry or new underwriters or, new sort of backing for a certain underwriter or those sort of things. Like it does pop up somewhere. And I think it is, it's not stuff you have to know, but I think it does
Mm.
help you to sort of get a sort of more rounded understanding of what's currently happening in the market, and being able to relate that back to your clients as well, I think is a big thing. Like obviously they've got their own business or they've their own life, whatever it may be, and we're there to really give them understanding of the industry and the market, and make it as easy as possible for them to understand insurance. So I think doing all those things, as I said, can really help.
So true. It really resonates with me because I know when we were going through our insurance for our business and trying to
Yeah.
understand what all the different things meant, it's just
Yeah,
like
exactly. It is a
mind-boggling.
lot. Yeah, it is a lot. And like we give out these PDSs, etc., for example, and all these insurers put these massive PDSs together, and you go read through it, and a lot of it doesn't make too much sense if you really don't know insurance in general. So, as you can imagine with business policies or general liability policies or PI policy, etc. Like there's a lot of things in there that just really make no sense. So I think
Mm,
that's, as you said, like it's super key that you do understand things really well, and you do sort of are interested in it. And I think that makes it easier to really, actually be able to provide an understanding to the clients that's super simple, and isn't just a bunch of jargon that's coming from the PDS that you're referring to, which you might not know yourself, and they definitely won't know. So
yeah.
it's tricky, yeah.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge you faced throughout your first few years of broking?
Um, Look, I think it's definitely I wouldn't say it's the relationship side of things with clients. I think that's, it can be quite natural, I think, to a lot of people. Like I think for a start, you're learning the business, you're learning how insurance works, etc. And it is sometimes hard to juggle, I think, like trying to offer a really great service, but also learning at the same time. So
Mm,
I think that was probably a big thing, and also claims as well. That's a big thing to kind of manage at the same time, as whilst also you're sorting renewals and
yeah.
sorting incoming leads and whatever, all that sort of stuff as well. So it is a juggle, but I think probably the biggest thing is really for me just learning about claims,
Mm,
and really getting a sort of deeper understanding of when something happens, like, what can I do to make it easier for the client, or, what's going to happen so I can tell them what's going to happen.
yeah.
And really just sort of those things. And obviously, really difficult claims, those have been the biggest challenges. There's a
Sure.
lot of emotions in claims, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Someone's getting sued, or they've lost their house, or as I said, like they've had the car stolen, like it's their prized asset, it's their life. So, there is a lot of emotion, and that's definitely, does come back onto you quite a bit as the broker, but I think it's not so much back at you. It's really just that you're the middleman between the insurer and the client, and you've really got to do your job and make sure that you do help the client as best as you can. But yeah, that's probably one of the bigger things. But I think you do learn it in time, and it does become easier, obviously, over time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Constant theme that we're hearing throughout this is definitely around that further learning and just always be learning,
yeah,
always
it
educating
is.
yourself.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah. And that's like the industry. Like, I think as soon as you stop learning, like, that's essentially degrading the service you're providing to your clients. Because I think, like I look at my old fellow, like, he could tell you exactly what a PDS says off by heart. All these sort of things, like if you're not interested in, I think, in learning and really just taking things on and understanding things, I don't think it's a great industry for you. But I think if you're interested in looking at documents and sort of sifting through a lot of things that you can actually understand, or eventually understand, and you take on board and you can relay to someone else, and it's actually interesting to you, then I think it's really great industry to be in.
Yeah. Love it. So we're going to move on now to the question that our last
Yeah,
guest has left for you.
yeah,
So our last guest was Rachel. Rachel comes from a claims background. So
yeah.
she wants to know, do you feel insurance professionals will be replaced by AI tools?
Well, it's $1 million question.
Mm,
I don't think so. I mean, I've had a lot of exposure to AI, and this technology in general, like over the past sort of couple of years. And I think whilst it is a great technology, and it is really crucial, I think, for any business these days to start adopting it, and making it part of their workflows, just to make things easier. Obviously, with the whole data and encryption side of things being, and privacy being super crucial as well. But
mm,
I don't think they will. I think brokers, it's about service and it's about people. I
yes.
think the whole people side of things will always be there. I don't think an AI talking to someone that's, had a liability claim where they're getting sued for 10 to $20 million is going to be sufficient for someone that really wants to, talk to someone in person, or, have a conversation over the phone that's actually legitimate and, feels really genuine. So I think it's, as you know, like it's a people business that won't ever change. And we know that unless there's a bunch of, in 50 years time, somehow it's basically just AI and people have somehow exterminated from the planet or something like that. But, it's going to be around, but I think AI will definitely make it easier, I think, to be a broker in time. Like, I think a lot of solutions now are still kind of in their infancy, and I think we're only really just yet to see how they're really going to make our jobs easier and insurance in general easier as well.
For sure. I think so many different industries. It's going to be really interesting to watch how that evolves over the next few years. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of the mundane tasks and stuff we do now, and a lot of the manual stuff, I think, that'll definitely be replaced or at least automated, which I think will be great. That'll just mean that we can provide a better service to our clients and have better relationships. So I think, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's still coming yet. I don't think it's there yet, but I definitely don't think brokers will be replaced in time. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And what question would you like to know from our next guest?
That's a good question. If they were going to start in the industry again, what would they do? Because I think broking is obviously, it's one side of the industry, but there is a lot of different sides. Like there's, actuaries and insurers, there's obviously underwriters, there's data analysts, whatever it may be. Like, I think you obviously look at the now and obviously brokers, but I think if I was looking back and I was going to go back into the industry, like there's a lot of things that would interest me, like underwriting, etc. as well is super interesting. I think as brokers, like we have to understand underwriting and how it works so we can effectively, work with the insurers to do up a program for the clients that's actually, competitive and actually covers them properly. But yeah, there's probably a few things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for being this week's guinea pig. Love to have
appreciate it
in the hot seat. It's great, mate. So appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Cooper.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. A big thank you to our guest, and we hope you found some value from this episode's chat. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to send it to a mate and hit follow so you don't miss what's next. I'm Nathan Anning, Director and Insurance Recruiter at Impact Talent Australia. Catch you next time.